Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, how the heck are you? We are already in July. I realized after I recorded last week's episode, the intro, that it comes out on July 4th, and I didn't even acknowledge it. So did you have a good 4th of July if you're here in the States? And if you're not, then probably doesn't even matter. Today's episode is kind of interesting. It took us about 13 minutes to get into the topic. We kind of went a lot of different places. I think it ties together. I think there are a lot of questions that we don't answer. We do talk about co-regulating does not mean that you're calm, but we start out talking a little bit about what pedantic means and how the definitions that I saw were pretty clearly written by someone who's not neurodivergent. And we talk about that. And I think it's a really helpful conversation, especially if you use this lens to look at information that you're getting that feels like you're getting the message that how you show up in the world is not okay, because so much of what is written, researched, talked about is from a neurotypical lens. And so sensitivity, being a deep thinker, being detail-oriented, can often be presented in terms of deficits or there being something wrong, which is why it's so important to not only understand your own neurodivergence, but to find resources and to really understand how you're wired and the strengths that you have because of how you're wired. And we talk about this. Then I wanted to talk about how being pedantic shows up in my relationships and attunement and how that works with co-regulation. And Jen started to give an example. We're not sure how much of it can be edited out. And because my tasky brain was so on task that she kind of got lost and didn't know what her point was. And I just wanted to get back on track. So I was not super validating and helping her wrap it up. We talk about it in the episode. There's nothing wrong with it. The reason why I want to have you listen to this episode is this is about us being human. This is about us hitting record. I had some notes I wanted to talk about. Jen prefers to show up spontaneously. I think as long as one of us is directed, I think it works out fine. And sometimes you get episodes like you're going to get today, and maybe at the end you'll go like, that was a lot of stuff. Where did we go? I'm all about being human, about being imperfect, about done is better than perfect. But we do talk about what do you do if you're in a relationship and you've asked somebody to communicate with you a certain way and they're not able to. The example that we talk about is if you're non-binary or you're transgender and you're asking someone to use pronouns, they don't use your pronouns, and how that can show up in different relationships. And if you do talk to them and then they don't honor your pronouns, what that can bring up for you, which is the same as if somebody talks to you about being too sensitive or too analytical. How do you navigate those things? We also talk about, if you see everybody as being on the same playing field, are you able to differentiate different types of relationships, and how does that authenticity show up? And I talk about some of the areas that I'm struggling with this and how, as I'm learning more about my own neurodivergence, that some frameworks may not work for me. I think whether you identify as HSP, as autistic, as ADHD, non-binary, transgender, that even though we are not talking about all of these things, I think it's still very relatable to the things that show up, the biases that we have, how we can learn to speak up for ourselves. I don't know. I think it's pretty darn cool. What do you think? And now, on to the show. Hey, Jen, how are you?
Hi there, Patricia. I'm okay.
Yeah?
I'm actually okay. Yeah. A little bit of a crazy day, of course, because that's what life has been like. But yeah, it's nice to check in with myself there right when you asked me how I was, and to really feel like pretty grounded and solid, even as the life craziness doesn't stop. So thank you for asking. That felt good to check in with.
Sure.
How are you?
I'm doing really well today. I paddled this morning and then I was in the kitchen. I listened to some music, and I usually don't listen to music. And I actually had my arms above my head and I was dancing, and that's very unusual to me. And you and I recorded
I love it.
I know. You and I recorded on Saturday. We didn't think we'd be able to record today on Wednesday, but it's been a hard couple days for both of us for different reasons. And I've been very present to a lot of discomfort and really not knowing what I wanted. And I really am finding another layer of finding my voice and speaking my truth. And I really think that that's why I was dancing in the kitchen this morning and why I'm feeling really good. And I'll tell you, last week when I went to do something, I was so dysregulated and thought, is this activity worth doing? Because I become so dysregulated before I go for a number of reasons. And I did not have that the next time I went to do this activity. And I'm sharing this with you because I think it's a testament to when we're willing and able to be present for the things that are just very difficult and uncomfortable and things that we don't know how we're going to solve or how we're going to figure out. They can be very dysregulating and can really throw us very much out of balance, that we move in it, we move out of it, we move in it, we move out of it. And for me, finding my voice has been incredibly powerful. And I think that's why I'm feeling kind of yippity-doo-dah today.
That's beautiful. Yeah. That is really that trusting yourself and your process and just speaking it. I know last time we were recording on Saturday, we were talking about just, it doesn't have to be a game stopper. If you can gently walk yourself through something, even if you are feeling dysregulated, it's not always the right thing to do. Sometimes the right thing to do is to be like, no, reverse. But there's a lot to be learned from just being present to yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So a couple of things, because I've been talking about being pedantic and I really did not know exactly what that meant. I looked it up.
I think we started the last episode with a very similar statement. It was a different word. It wasn't pedantic. It was something else. I can't remember what it is right now, but I'm just chuckling because
I think we're talking about the double bind empathy, that we use that incorrectly.
Yeah. I don't know. I really love this. And I love looking stuff up and agreeing. Words are these little symbols to try to communicate to each other what we're experiencing, and to go and to take the care to look it up and stuff like that. I like that. Well,
and here's the thing, that by the definition, I'll read you some of what I read. It is so non-neurodivergent friendly. It is just, I'm convinced that an holistic person wrote this. So pedantic is negative. It means closed-minded, overly concerned with minutia, details, or formalisms. When you're overly concerned with the little stuff, it's hard to see the big, beautiful picture, is what I read. Annoying for their attention to minor detail, people that correct other people. And what we know about, and I'm pedantic, and I own it, and it's a compliment.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, that the way my brain is wired is to notice all kinds of details. And that's what makes me a great problem solver, a troubleshooter. I notice details. I can be very thorough, not in everything, because I also have ADHD, so it depends on which part of my brain is operating that day. But words are very, very important to me, and I'm really okay with that. But I guess I want to give you a chance to talk, but can you see where the bias is of this being written by someone who is not pedantic and who is not neurodivergent, and how there's so much negative bias about the things that we notice and are tuned into and dialed into that are important to us. And just because somebody's brain doesn't notice those things or is not important to them, the way that the language and the wording, and it said, being called pedantic is not a compliment.
I'd love to have you, now that you've told us this, can you read it to me again?
Yes.
The definition.
These were just some words that I wrote down. Closed-minded, overly concerned with minutia, details, or formalisms. Annoying, so the person who's being pedantic can be annoying for their attention to minor detail. They tend to correct. And then it had this little statement that said, when you're overly concerned with the little stuff, it's hard to see the big, beautiful picture. So that's like somebody telling you, don't worry, don't be so sensitive, don't be so analytic.
Mm-hmm. I just got that feeling like it's like the snapshot. And I'm relating it to myself, of course, because we're all self-referential. And there's moments where I'm really in tune to detail. And then there's moments when I'm up seeing the big picture. So it's almost like someone took a Polaroid snapshot at one particular time. Mm-hmm. And then if we use that to label ourselves in a static way, it's just so unfair. And then to your point, we're human, right? We have a bias. It's kind of as natural as standing in one corner of the room and having a point of view, literally, on the room that's different from the one that you would have if you stood in a different corner.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is us in context. Let's disclose our biases.
Right.
If we're looking at human beings and we're working from the medical model, that's going to veer us one way. If we're doing it, we're looking more from like a learning model, that's a different place in the room to stand and look at us ourselves.
What I find with neurodivergence is generally we have the ability to shift perspective. So we can see the room from all four angles. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes people that are not neurodivergent see the room from one angle, and that is the truth. And their position is that everybody else should see it from that angle, and they don't have the ability to see that there's more than one perspective. Yes.
I remember just kind of growing up with myself and trying to figure out myself. And I used to think I didn't, like, what do I think? Because I called myself nebulous, right? Because I couldn't kind of grasp. And, as a therapist, this is important too, because you can see all these different points of view and really step in. I want to add something to this discussion, this conversation, because I'm thinking whenever I'm defining anything, I'm thinking of, it brings me right back to William Shakespeare and his contemporary Webster, who had the bright idea in the 1400s to write everything down in a book and solidify our spelling, right? Because before that, there was no spelling police, right? And to really, in some ways, freeze the language. And I love it when people argue about, well, it's not in the dictionary, so it's not a real word. But I'm like, yeah, but if people are out here using it, it's a word. Which comes first, right? Well, language came first. The book comes later. Same thing with things like the DSM. There are things that used to be in the DSM that aren't anymore, and things that will go back in and come back out. So this idea, the idea I want to throw out there, and I'm curious about your thoughts, are evolution. Mm-hmm. Evolution is not something moldy oldie that happens in our science textbooks, right? It is a real thing, and things change and adapt quickly. And so I love looking at ourselves in a historical context. And I'm so curious because you hear over time that, trying to explain why in a population you see all of a sudden more of things. And it's like, well, is it because it got in the DSM-4, so now it's recognized and it's being diagnosed, or this or that? And there's always, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but this idea that like the population and human beings should somehow be staying the same. And what if we actually are evolving in this way? Because I see all of the positives with being neurodivergent. I don't know. I just want to throw that into our conversation.
So what I heard, and I don't know if this is what you were saying, is that if we are having more people that are showing up and being diagnosed with ADHD or autism, is it that there's more in the environment, or is it that we're learning more about it and the criteria is changing? But I don't know that that's what you were saying, but that's what my brain heard.
I think that we're changing and evolving, and it's happening right now, and this is the direction. And we need to have some bit of the population that can have these multiple perspectives, and that this is a change that's happening right now. And that's why we're seeing so much more of it and seeing more of ourselves in it. And then in some ways also being taught it, because it's always like nature and nurture work together, like they're not split apart. And that then grows our brains also. And I don't know, I'm just fascinated and I'm excited because I see it as a wonderful trajectory.
I think a lot of different disciplines need to talk to each other. That I was listening to someone who's got a double PhD, and one of the PhDs is in neuropsychology. And this person was talking about the DSM and neuropsychology and how the two disciplines don't talk to each other. And because this person has an amazing ability to synthesize information, they had some insights about diagnoses and comorbidities. And I just thought it was fascinating. And as I've been trying to sort out my process of where do I fit and how do I talk about things, and I'm still being vaguer than I probably need to be, but I'm just sorting that out. I love hearing that there's more uncertainty and that we've got these different areas of research, but people aren't talking to each other, because I think there's just so much more that we don't know. And there are so many strengths and gifts. Yeah, there are challenges, but you're going to have that with anything. And I just love having new information.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would be excited about that too. I mean, I haven't spent a lot of time in academia or in research, just a little bit. And one thing that I did notice in some of the studies that I was exposed to, and this is just a small sample, the research teams that were in conversation with each other seemed, in my opinion, to be either debunking each other, or there was a little bit of a turf war.
Mm-hmm.
Even right now with like the things that we're talking about, like HSP, ADHD, autism, sensory processing disorder, all of the things. What I noticed was a sort of, I would say, a bit of a competitive back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, absolutely collaboration happens among teams. And we need more of that. Maybe I'll just say it that way.
Yeah.
Because a part of human nature to be like, oh, we're working on this and then we're working on that. But no, that's not the right way to think about it. And it's like, hey, everybody, like there are different lenses and each lens has some validity.
Sure.
And gets a piece of it. It's like that story about the blind man and the elephant, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to jump into what I was hoping we talk about today, so we'll see how far we can get with it. Are you okay if we switch gears a little bit?
Yeah, let's do it.
So I saw something recently that just really resonated with me, and what it said is that co-regulation does not mean that you're calm. And I think we have this idea that co-regulating with someone means that our nervous system becomes calm, but it really is about attunement and being present in the moment to what is happening. So if I'm dysregulated and you are present with me, maybe I'm angry, maybe you're also angry on my behalf. If I'm sad, then maybe you're holding space for me to be sad. But it's about you being present in the moment and us noticing what's going on, and you're attuned and in my world. That is what co-regulation is. And my experience recently is because I've been so welcomed with many, many opportunities to be incredibly dysregulated and very confused. I mean, I joke, but it's been a hard couple of weeks. I feel like I've just been getting hit from all angles. And I've had these beautiful experiences of having you and some other friends be so present for me when I'm dysregulated. And we don't fix or solve anything, but just that sense of being connected and having people that understand and get where I'm at. And this is a little bit of where the pedantic part comes in, because what feels the most satisfying and delicious to me, and my nervous system can really end up relaxing, is when somebody is able to join me in my experience and be present for me and not have an agenda, not have to question, not have to doubt, not have to fix, not have to change. And language is so important. And the people that I'm the closest to, there's just not even an issue with the language that they're using, but how this may show up for other people. So one of the things that is just, I've gotten used to it now because I just had to. Let me use another example that's a little bit less benign. Somebody always says, you're so sensitive or you're so reactive or whatever your response is. And instead of somebody being able to really understand your experience, they tend to use judgmental words. This could also be present if somebody is non-binary, transgender, and has pronouns that are different than what they appear to be, and somebody not being able to honor their pronouns. And how challenging that can be, that if somebody identifies as they, them, and continues to be misgendered with she, her, or he, him pronouns, and has said, these are what my pronouns are, how that can be really upsetting and frustrating, and how do you navigate that? And it's possible that the person who's non-binary or transgender, this is kind of a difficult thing to talk about because there are so many different types of relationships where this could show up, and some of them have power differentials and some don't. But if it's an adult child with a parent, or a boss and a employee, or two coworkers or friends, that there are times when you can say something and times when you can't. But if you've let somebody know what your pronouns are and they continue to not use your pronouns, how does that feel? And if you decide to have a vulnerable conversation with them about, you're not seeing who I am. And when you misgender me, I don't feel like I'm being seen and heard. It would be like me walking up to somebody and misgendering someone who's clearly not that gender. So if you have this vulnerable conversation and you're able to get curious and you ask them, help me understand why you don't use my pronouns. It could be that they forget. It could be that they don't believe it. It could be that they don't get it. But this goes back to what I was talking about is whether you understand it, whether you buy into it, if you really want to be present for someone, you use the language that they're asking you to use because that helps them feel seen and heard and feel safe. Then there's this other level of risk that happens that if I'm the person who's non-binary and I'm telling somebody, this is how it feels when you don't use my pronouns, it's really important we have this conversation, and then you continue to misgender me, then that is going to potentially bring up even more feelings if it's a relationship that I'm not able to opt out of. And so these are things that can be really challenging to navigate through because sometimes it's easier to just not say anything because at least we haven't had a conversation, because if I tell you and then you don't do it, then what do I do? And this is where, for me, not regarding gender, but this is where being pedantic comes up, because there are certain things that people can say to me that just send my nervous system through the absolute roof. Fortunately, it's a very small percentage that I get triggered, and I'm really looking at what is happening with that. It's a little bit different, but I think it's a very good analogy. So I'm going to stop for a minute and let you talk.
Wow. My mama heart's responding to everything that you said.
Yeah.
Having an NB.
Non-binary.
Non-binary child. Yeah. And being on that journey myself for almost, I guess it'll be coming up on a year now. And you know where I go. I mean, you know where my brain launches into existential loneliness, right? And co-regulating. I love what you said, that it doesn't always mean that you're calm. Conscious parenting doesn't mean that you're calm. Mm-hmm. We have all these like stereotypes, I think, and the importance of getting out of theory and into experience, and out of theory and maybe into understanding other people's experiences. My favorite parenting question of all time: what do you want me to know about what that experience was like for you to a child? And then having the courage and I'll be bleeding, my tongue will be bleeding, to bite my tongue and just listen. I was just talking with a fellow mom about that today. I'm curious. So we are alone in here, right? In my head, I am alone in here as I say we. That's hilarious.
I
right?
hate when we have these conversations, but go ahead. I hate them.
Know.
I hate them.
Really?
I do.
Oh, that's so fun. Okay. I'm going to make space for you hating this part of me. And I'm going to risk you knowing this part of me. So, all right, hear me out for a minute, right? It's terrifying. Like, no one is in here with me, and it can get really lonely. So the degree to which you see me is the degree to which I feel that I inhabit this space, not quite so alone. Right? And the more of that I can get, and sometimes all the time we socially construct each other. So my brain is filling in all these blanks. And then when all of a sudden you're like, hey, no, that is either an opportunity to expand intimacy into me, you see, or to shut it down. What are the things that shut us down? I'm so curious about that. When I do work with teens and it's like someone's lying, instead of honing right in on the lie, I am much more curious about what is it right now that's making it hard to tell the truth, right? So what right now is making it hard for me to validate your experience, whether you're NB, right, non-binary, or highly sensitive, or the paths diverge, right? There is something that we're not on the same page about. And so what is it, right? What is it that shuts it down? Is it fear? Is it a need to be right? Is it not wanting to evolve? I read a paper a long time ago, and I've never been able to find it again, about how important it is for people maybe around my age, right? 40s, 50s, to look at our adolescence and stay open. And instead of talking, yeah, I know what's best for you, like, no, especially nowadays with technology everything being so fast, it's important. And I was thinking about this, and I've been thinking a lot about non-binary. And it's just so interesting because that younger generation, most of them, from what I can tell, and I may have a skewed sample here of like, we are just we have a lot of, my kid calls them all the queer peers, right? So there's a lot of openness. But like the kids get it in ways that maybe we don't. It's just so important to really be open to each other's experience, which is what co-regulation is, right? Let me hear you. Let me be here with you. Let me understand. That's calming. What are the things that prevent that? Are we more wedded to an idea? Are we more wedded to a theory than what is actual experience? And these are important because we've got a large part of the population not just denying someone's experience, but then working against them.
Taking away people's human rights.
Taking away people's human rights. These are really important questions. What is it that makes this hard? Right? What are you afraid of? What's the fear? It's fascinating. I was having a conversation that I've been noticing a trend. And so this is not true for everyone, right? But this is something that I experienced where, now that gay marriage is a thing, that there were some rights, that there's less gay and lesbian people who identify that way as embracing like being queer, right? Because of the getting more accepted into the mainstream, I think. I mean, that's like some thoughts that I was having about it. And then it's just fascinating to me. And I do think I've totally gotten off the rails. I'm so sorry.
You're okay.
All right, I'm going to shut up now. Whew.
All right. I'm going to go back to what I was talking about.
This is hilarious. This is the episode, Patricia.
This is not the episode.
This is the episode.
This is not the episode. I just want to say I rebuke you because I think that's funny. And then I wonder if people listen that are very religious and if that's offensive. And it's not my intention to be offensive, but it may be offensive. One of the things that I know about autistics, I'm just going to say it, this may relate to you or not. I'm really struggling with how to identify things because I am starting to sort out or parse out for myself of what is autistic, what's HSP, what's ADHD. And I don't often know the difference between HSP and autism, but what is going on for me in my relationships is, as an autistic, we don't have hierarchy. Everybody is on a level playing field. And my friend Soup Jean is always talking to me about we have different relationships, and some people are the trunk of a tree, some people are the branches of the tree, and some people are the leaves of the tree. And as I've been going through some challenges with friendships and trying to sort things through, I always try and think back to this framework that Jean has. But I'm wondering if, because the way that my brain works, that's not a paradigm that is a natural paradigm for me. And through this struggle that I've been having, I've been telling you, Jen, like I'm just trying to figure it out. Like I just want to figure out what's the rule or where's the box or how does this fit? Because it initially was so upsetting to me that I don't want to go through this again. And if there's something I can do to not have it happen again, which I am getting some insights. But I was thinking today that if everything is on an equal playing field, then how do I decide what I share with certain people and not with other people and what's authentic? And I'm not saying that I necessarily show up and share all my business to everybody, but I think that this may be part of the challenge that I have because I tend to be pretty authentic with most people. It's funny, we got rid of a bed frame over the weekend and I posted it on some site for free and somebody said, I want it, I'm going to come and get it. Can you please take the free sign off of it? And I said, sure. And an hour passed and they didn't come. And then I reached out again because I probably got 30 people reaching out to me over this bed frame. And I said, are you going to come? They said, yes, I'll be there by 9. I said, great. And I went to bed and woke up in the morning and guess what was still on the front lawn? Actually, we moved it off the lawn because of the sprinklers. And then we moved it back on the lawn because they were supposed to get it. And then in the morning it was still there. So we had to move it off the lawn again because of the sprinklers. And so I started reaching out to some other people saying, hey, it's still available. And this person said, I can pick it up tonight. This was early in the morning. And I said, are you sure? I said, if you don't, I'm going to be a bitter old lady because you're going to ruin how I feel about people. And I still had to, people were still asking, is it available? Mm-hmm. So I actually went back on the app and marked it as sold. And then the person that was going to pick it up at 5:30 said, is it still available? I'm like, yeah, I'm holding it for you. So many people are asking about this. But I think that is an example of how we get influenced by things, and that having hope and expecting, like if you say you're going to be here, I expect you to be here. And then if you're not, like what the heck? Because then I had to deal with an extra 30 people telling them that it was here, it wasn't here, all of that stuff. I had a point, but I kind of lost it at this point. But this is not the episode.
It's so funny as I've gotten a little distant, because I went into some like real embarrassment there. I was trying to go into, I lost my train of thought, and then showing myself grace. I do have a sick child. We were in the hospital not that long ago. I've been through a bunch of things. So keeping myself in context, staying gentle with myself. We had a doctor's appointment right before this.
Right.
Well, one client before this.
Yeah.
And now that I'm a little bit removed, I'm not in that flare. So if I had that decision to make in that moment, it would have definitely been in the trash. And now I'm like, you know what? Just like, let it go. It happens. You're human. Happens to all of us. Kind of like my wanting my house cleaning philosophy is that I want to make everybody else feel better about their housekeeping. Right? That it's just real. Right? And I'm very committed to like not having to hold perfectionism up. So I was really enjoying your story. I know that you had a point. I love what you were saying about human nature, or wanting to not be a bitter lady with this view of who humans are. And like, it's funny, like the scale, there are so many human beings out there, and we can only interact with, ratio wise, like a minuscule amount of them. And then we make these big generalizations that we turn into, I don't know. Like, I wouldn't want you to be a bitter old lady either, just because someone couldn't get their crap together, because half the time that person not having their crap together is me.
Yeah. Well, two things. One is my tasky brain is on, and I have things I want to talk about. And I'm sorry that you went into feeling uncomfortable about what you talked about. And I am thinking I didn't do a very good job being present for you because my tasky brain was on and I wanted to get back to my tasks.
Oh, no, no, I wouldn't. It was all me.
But I'm just saying, when I heard you say that, where my brain went was, I could have attended better to you. And I'm just like, okay, let's get back on track, because I want to talk about what I want to talk about. And you know this about me.
But
it's okay. But I think even having these kinds of conversations is why we can do the work that we do, because it's just honest and authentic, and it's okay.
Yeah.
And I think my point of my story about the person picking up is that I tend to be really authentic, and most people would not have said, if you don't pick it up, I'm going to be a bitter old lady. And so, and that's just how I show up. And so I think having awareness of how we're wired and how we process the world and how different people process the world. And it was really sweet. This person ended up messaging me later that night and just said, thank you so much. I really appreciate getting in. I thought, oh, the world is a good place, and you're a nice person. And I did reach out to the other person and said, I'm disappointed that you weren't able to come, and I really would have preferred if you would have communicated that with me. That was an okay thing to say. And part of what you and I were talking about this morning, or I was talking about with you, is, and I've talked about this before, is I was socialized to not say unkind things, impolite things, hurt people's feelings, and I often do not tell the truth. And because of this attention to details, there are times when I need to just keep my mouth shut. And how do we know when to say something, when not to say something? And then what often happens is we don't say something, it builds up, it builds up, it builds up, it builds up. And then there's either a rupture in the relationship, or I just lose my stuff. That happens primarily with my husband. It hasn't happened in a long time. But when little things keep bothering us and we can't work it out, that we do get that volcano. Hopefully, if that happens, we can do rupture and repair work. But also this part of me that does not speak my truth. And it ends up hurting relationships when it gets to a point where there's a breakdown, because I haven't said something for so long. And it's equivalent to the thing with the pronouns. Do you say something? Do you make a deal? Do you not? What's the nature of the relationship? What if they can't hear you? How much do you say? How much do you not say? And I think those are all real concerns that happen. And I don't have a real clear answer. I wish I did.
I love questions more than answers.
I know you do.
Anyway. I mean it. I really do. I just think staying open to that, because of course I think the answer is probably somewhere in the ballpark of it depends.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, right? So let's keep asking the question. I think I'm also learning that there's something about that directness that is so refreshing, and that there's a way to do it with kindness, because what were we taught, right? That if you weren't people pleasing, you were mean.
Selfish.
And so, and yet it's valuable if we're really going to inhabit, again, I'm going back to existential loneliness. Like if we're to inhabit a space that we are trying to share. Patricia's making a face at me. Mom.
We all come in alone, we die alone. It scares me when you say that. The truth is it scares me when you say that, and I don't like it. But I do agree with the existential loneliness, but yeah.
I get it. Well, there's a wedge there if you're not being honest with each other. And there are times when it matters, like in close relationships. And there are times when it doesn't matter so much, like being nice to, a stranger you're never going to see again, or someone picking up a bed frame. Which, if you were not so gracious, if you had the explosion, you would have had a very different experience.
Right.
And then we would have come to conclusions about that person's just whatever,
Right.
angry. Like, no, it's like it's a constant back and forth, right?
But if we go back to the example with the pronouns and say that it's, I don't even want to name the type of relationship that it is, but I've said what my pronouns are, and the person still continues to not honor my pronouns for whatever reason. And I can go along with that for a certain amount of time, but there may be a time when I just hit my limit and it really makes me mad. And then all the other ways that I feel like I've been either marginalized or not honored or not heard. Again, it's not a perfect example, but how do we navigate that? Because those are real things that happen. And sometimes in those relationships, you just have to go, that's the best they're doing, that they're not going to change because they can't remember. It's not important. They forget, whatever that is. But then it may get to that point where you've just had it. And when I have feelings about something means that I'm still invested in the relationship. And when I get to the point where I just don't care anymore, it's just gone too far. It doesn't matter. I don't care what you do anymore because I've tried. And I'm not being seen and heard for whatever reason. I'm just done.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, what's coming to my mind is just how, I know I'm a proud mama, but just how beautifully my child did this. And it was very merciful, but also very constant, very kind, but very constant. Gave me that benefit of the doubt, right? And we have some Buddhist leanings around here. So it's like basic goodness, right? Versus ignorance, right? Instead of good versus evil. And we built it. And neuroplasticity, right? On my part, like I got it. And it took my 50-year-old brain a while. And I wanted to do it. I would start to cry every time I messed up, which of course is problematic.
So you're
for
talking
them
about using pronouns that match your child's being non-binary. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just did it, I did it with the doctor this morning, and I did it on their behalf because they were exhausted, and we're going to the doctor. So I corrected her about their name and informed her about their pronouns. And I said what my pronouns were, for you, which I do all the time now, just to try to normalize that as an ally to my child. The other thing is a little metaphor kind of came to mind that I've been using lately in conversations as I'm getting to know people. So relationships have this developmental trajectories. Like you start off as strangers and then you gradually get to know someone, and that takes time, right? That Georgia O'Keeffe quote I love so much. Like it takes time to see a flower, it takes time to have a friend. And then there may be natural points where you learn that diverge, and that's okay. It's just not resonant as you continue to build. And then in these mini conversations, I think of it with my child correcting me, right? Or with me providing some information that something kind of hurt me or didn't land right, or I want clarification, that it's like building a tower together of blocks. you could lean it just a little bit this way. And you do these small, like micro corrections, or you don't do that. And then the whole, right, it all falls down because we're being stubborn, or we're not being open, or we're being fearful. Mm-hmm. And this checking in, you were mentioning like our weekend together with the co-regulating and stuff. And there was a lot of checking in. I love, particularly with language, we were talking about being word nerds here, that asking for clarifying questions. I had a very, very, very important relationship in my life that I was really invested in and really wanted to go well. And one of the biggest points that made it difficult and ultimately very sad still meant the sort of the ending of the relationship, or the changing of it and having certain boundaries around it. But my point being, this person baseline really was, if you're listening, you're going to understand what I say, and we're not going to miscommunicate. Whereas my basis was always, it's a miracle any of us understand what anybody else is saying, given that we're using these little symbolic words to communicate an intensely 360 degree plus whatever's going on inside experience with history, with our personal histories bearing all of this stuff. So for me, clarifying questions is just part of those, building those blocks together and knowing like where to place it. So that I think is important. And there we're back to biases. What's your paradigm? What are your assumptions you're making? What are your expectations? And can we talk about these little, the best we have right here. Human languages have limitations.
Totally agree with you. I have lots to say and nothing to say, and I'm looking at the time, and I think I'm going to go with the nothing to say.
Yeah. This recording was a little bit of an experiment, right? Because we always just hit record, but we really just hit record this time. Mm-hmm.
What I'm thinking is it's very possible that you, the listener, may often track what Jen says better. You may track what I say better. And again, that's just about how our brains are wired. And oftentimes somebody's trying to explain something to me and my brain just can't track it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. And again, we just come wired the way that we do, and we can learn, as Jen's talking about, to ask questions and get curious. And I think just knowing that sometimes we may bump up against stuff just because of how we're wired and how much awareness we have about that and how much we're able to navigate around that. And sometimes we can and sometimes we can't. It's not easy, but I really want to go back to that thing that co-regulation does not mean that you're calm. It just means that you're present with somebody in the moment with that attunement. And that is a huge gift. Huge gift.
Yes. Yeah. It is something we can all give each other. Yeah. We just got to be patient and open.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for being here today, Jen.
Bye, my dear.
All right. Bye. Hey again. So what did you think? Was it confusing? Did it make sense? Did a couple things land with you? Feel free to shoot me an email. I know initially, if you're a longtime listener, I'm like, if you don't have anything nice to say, I can't handle it. I've been going through so much stuff recently that I'm pretty good at handling all kinds of things now. So if you want to give me feedback about it, I'm open to hearing. If you are struggling, if any of these things resonated for you, if speaking up for yourself, telling the truth, being authentic, feeling like you have a right to say things that are true for you that maybe are not okay for other people to hear based on how you've been raised, setting boundaries with people, figuring out relationships and friendships. If any of those things are coming up for you, or anything else you want to learn how to thrive as someone who's neurodivergent, you need help with systems, you're struggling, please feel free to reach out to either Jen or myself. If you're interested in working with Jen, you can reach her at jen@heartfulnessconsulting.com. I love sending you to my website because I have a form there that helps me have the information that helps me to schedule something with you for a free 20-minute consultation at unapologeticallysensitive.com. If you want to shoot me an email, I'm at unapologeticallysensitive@gmail.com. I hope you're doing well. I hope the summer is going... I hope it's just a nice time for you. And if it's hard, that's okay too. Sometimes things are just hard. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. However you show up in the world is perfect. You are a gift. You have strengths. You have beautiful things to offer the world. You are not too much. You are not pedantic. Unless you think it's a compliment like I do. And I am pedantic, and I'm okay with that. You have a right to have a voice. It's okay if people don't like you. It's okay if people don't agree with you. You have a right to all of your thoughts and feelings. Hope you're doing well. Have a blessed day.